Hey everybody, it's Marnie here for another weekly check-in. I hope you're all having a wonderful start to your week. And we're at the end of November. We're still in Mercury retrograde over here. I mean, that's a global thing, so I guess we're all in it. And there's snow coming down. The weather is very snowy. We had actually a really warm day yesterday, but the snow has returned. And I've been gearing up with a lot of moisturizer, which I put on every day because of the cold, harsh air. And this week I wanted to talk to you about a couple different things that came to mind as I was sitting here pondering before I started the video. One is talking about starseeds coming in, and just a thought I had. New children coming in to the planet. Most of you probably know that I'm going to be having a baby very soon, in a couple months. So these are themes that I started researching because of that. Starseeds coming on the planet, but also there's like an energy healing niche related to spirit babies, and just the importance of acknowledging that these beings that are coming in are their own individuated soul with missions and intentions, and going towards I guess names. But let me get to all of the different themes first, and then I'll get into some more details. So first thing, spirit babies. Second thing, the name of my child that came through, and also some information related to the Bible and a decode by a guy named Abraham Gileadi. Abraham Gileadi, that I've been listening to, and I thought it's fresh in my mind how interesting that his interpretation anyway. I'm going to be listening to a couple more audiobooks, but his interpretation very much aligns with reincarnation and soul development, the new paradigm. It's so interesting. I've never actually heard that. I guess I haven't studied the Bible enough. I'm coming to realize that when you're in Catholicism, you learn a lot about Jesus, and it's very selective what you learn, what gets focused on each year. I suppose it depends on the priest. But I also remember just from childhood, the certain narrative that you have of Jesus is very much about his birth, some of his teachings, some special miracle moments. And then, there's some good heart stuff there about forgiveness and being a good person and all these types of things. So to sum it all up in a sentence or two. So when I talk about that book, then I want to also talk about something that has been, I guess, still knocking on the edges of my awareness, some fear that I have about stepping into sharing life from a higher vantage point, or this kind of spiritually oriented vantage point, because of my upbringing in religion. I guess this is what's clashing inside of me right now. So I've come to some resolutions, and I thought that I would share them here. So those are the three things. Let me see what I got. I got spirit babies, Isaiah Decoded, spirit babies, names, and religion, and talking about different deities, different multidimensional beings, kind of breaking away, finding a way to break out of this encapsulation of only working with Jesus. Not saying that it's wrong to only work with one being, but it is questionable when there are so many different enlightened masters and spiritual activators that have come to the planet. Lucifer being one of them, which is something I wanted to touch on today, just in a totally, I grew up as on a very basic grassroots, in a very basic grassroots family, no secret societies, no hidden religions. And so my interpretation of Lucifer is very much just my own kind of flavor from incorporating past life memories, as well as understanding that the Luciferic energy based on Rudolf Steiner's work is a lot to do with higher intelligence and the mind and wisdom in the mind, whereas Jesus is from the heart space. And I suppose when we start taking ownership as evolving spirits, like outsourcing our power, that idea that we're kind of in servitude to a certain being or a certain deity, for what purpose, becomes questionable, and that empowerment starts to come from the inside, from our own inner world. But it has to be kind of working from a certain inner development so that it doesn't go towards the ego. And of course, there's probably always a double-edged sword as you grow and evolve and continue to attain more inner empowerment. There's tests and trials and tribulations. And all of this actually kind of goes in together, because Isaiah Decoded, I keep looking over because I've got the title of the book up over here, has a lot to say about our growth as a soul. And in the words of this book, the title underneath, ascending the ladder to heaven, or descending. You could also go the other way, descend the ladder to hell. And I was working with a client the other day, and it just came to mind that it came out in a certain way where I realized, because of my memories, working in a more nefarious power role, that's also questionable. I mean, it comes in as such a sensorial truth, but it could also be that that's just a disincarnate being that wants to work with me or work through me to teach that shift of moving from the dark to the light on a soul level. Because what ends up happening in spiritual development, eventually I had another friend the other day who was reading the Law of One, explained to me that in the higher dimensions, past the 8th or 9th, I think she said, that the everything is polarized towards the light. When you get down into the lower dimensions, there is still dualism, and we live in dualism right now. So the more you evolve, basically, the more you will eventually have to move towards the light. And I've heard a couple stories about that before, and I guess maybe, metaphorically speaking or hypothetically speaking, if that memory I have was literally my own past life, then I have been one of those people that moved from the dark to the light. And being in the dark, working for the dark side, as you could say, the left-hand path, or however you want to call it, there's a whole system that is connected to that, which you can research on your own if you want to. But that shift of moving from the dark to the light, in a nutshell, gives you a sense of really like true deep understanding and compassion, and a fearlessness towards what all of that realm entails. And without it, I suppose, on a soul level, if we really zoom out, without having gone there, understood those spaces or those realms, were not, you could say, not fully complete on a soul level to have traversed kind of the entire spectrum of existence on Earth or in the galaxy or wherever you want to travel on a soul level. Anyway, let's get back to the beginning and start with spirit babies and names. So the story goes is I was having a lovely life, living in the sunshine and learning how to surf and living by the ocean. And so y'all know my name is Marnie, which means from the ocean. So I felt very connected to my natural state of being. And had a moment that we all have sometimes, and realized I was pregnant. So that we all have, you know what I'm trying to say without getting into the details. But anyway, came to a choice point where I had to decide whether I wanted to totally do a U-turn in my life. And I have been a nanny for a very long time. I haven't been a nanny for years, but I have a lot of background working with children, so it's not a foreign world to me. It's almost like very second nature, you could say. And there was a lot of different factors and a lot of different conversations that, from one month to the next brought me into a very different trajectory for my life that I did not anticipate, although perhaps I anticipated it at a higher level. So anyway, without getting into all the details of that journey of shifting into a new space, I mean, you can see if you track back on my YouTube videos, you can see there was a long hiatus where I was basically moving from Costa Rica, where I was living close to an eco-village and a lot of new paradigm people and collectives. There was a new, I forgot his name, but he's very well known man building another eco-village there. And that one seemed very interesting as well. So, this whole area in Costa Rica was full of the new earth or new paradigm consciousness, which is really cool idea and thing to experience. And I guess for me, I hope I get to go back one day as a little duo. But one thing that it did heal within me, I was there for 2 years, and coming back and having a bit of reflection on that, it's like how I think and how I feel when we're kind of the oddball in our community or in our family or where we live with, like, you don't feel that resonance amongst a lot of different people. It can create kind of like a negative loop in your ego, or a fear of speaking or having to over-explain things, or having this fear that people don't understand. That's all needs to be resolved through interaction. So imagine living somewhere where everybody understood you and everything just kind of normalizes and just grounds, and so it can be spoken out, just as the old world of living only in the physical domain with less connection to the earth can be just spoken out without a second thought. So I'm grateful for that. Anyway, getting back to it again, I realized I was pregnant and immediately went into looking for psychic support. And of course, I had 3D people as well who were very wise, feminine wisdom keepers who helped me make an informed decision. And at the same time, I was so interested to know what being would want to choose an accidental conception moment in an environment where there was not all that much mutual respect and understanding. Although, I'm like, how do I explain this? Nothing negative, just, when you want to go for the spice of life in a moment because your body says go, very rootsy, very tribal kind of physical energy. So I was like, well, usually souls want to come in when there's like a mother and a father in balance, and there's love and a space holding for a new being to come in. But it turns out that when these types of scenarios happen, for me, what seemed to come through was like a soul that now has the vibrational access to some really lower frequencies and really higher frequencies, a very large spectrum of energy, which is usually a healing soul and someone who has a lot of, I guess you could say, like sophistication or multifacetedness, and perhaps also some karma to work through. So I was like, after some time, I just went, okay, I'm gonna do this. And I think it was only a couple weeks, 3 weeks. You know, I'm always like, should I share my whole life like this? But it just feels so natural. So this is what's happening. A name came through. The name was Isaiah, and that's not a name I had ever thought of before to name a child. And at first I was like, I didn't even know if it was a boy yet. It's a boy. And it started to land, and then it just became naturally the name of my child very early on. And in that process, I did some research into spirit babies and learning about them. And kind of that, there's a woman online, maybe I can put it in the written component, but she works specifically with spirit babies and a lot with people who are having trouble conceiving. So she's really booked out, so I wasn't able to get a session with her, but I did learn some things about how children choose their parents or parent, and that also the name is really important. Their name that they come in with, their soul, basically their soul signature, right? Because you can work with the numerology of the name. That they usually pick their name and they'll give it to you psychically. They choose their name, and it's up to us to be able to receive it. So I really felt that coming in. Yeah, so it turns out I'm now looking at books about the name Isaiah. And before I move on to that, I also wanted to acknowledge that I was talking a lot about narcissistic and empathic relationships in my previous video chapter where I was doing videos every week. And how I really felt in that time that I had taken 3 tests with similar energies that have to correspond with that also correspond with my lineage, how the frequencies came through my parents. And so then that transposed into romantic relationships. And I bet a lot of you out there are aware of that idea that you attract or fall easily in love with vibrations of people who have similar resonance to your parents, because when we're children, we have an open subconscious and it gets developed in childhood from 0 to 7. And so how our parents were or are, if they haven't chose to do inner work, that will be kind of our template for romantic relationships in the future. So soul lessons come through in 3s, and the first version of it is completely unconscious, but usually that experience will come through and kind of knock you into awareness of when the end of it comes and there's pain of hey, why did this happen to me? The second time it comes around, it will be through awareness, but you don't yet have control of the solution or the changing of it. You could just kind of only have enough inner power to witness the situation and really maybe take notes, you could say, psychic notes as you're going through it. And this can be for anything, but I find my realm of focus and expertise has always been relational, mental and emotional relationships with others, but ultimately that is the relationship we have with ourselves, right? And that's where I've come to in the last couple of days with this particular energy that's still not coming through as a test anymore, but as something that's lingering now in my own energy field that needs to be resolved and alchemized into the new version. So the third version is when we make new choices in the 3D world, through our actions. Maybe there's still pain, it's still the same pattern, but the solution comes at the end. The understanding, the deeper awareness, the unchaining, unbonding, releasing from bondage from that pattern. So that's what happened to me, that during those videos, it was releasing from that pattern, and at the very end when I was I'm free, I can feel that release, that true release. And then I ended up realizing I was pregnant, not anything to do with those relationships, something completely separate, but kind of going okay, I finished one lesson and now I'm just like here with this brand new thing, like being a mom. That's a lot. And now in retrospect and kind of sitting with the frequency, and who knows, I'm always like, I get these downloads and these like deeper understandings, and I have had my chart read a number of times, and usually people tell me like to really trust my intuition because it's like always kind of spot on because of the depth of my incarnation, I guess you could say. I go right to the root. I'm a Scorpio. And but I never want to attach to things because you don't know till you know, right? You don't know till you're really there. But I still will share it because my whole life is kind of living in that multidimensional way. So anyway, I feel like what it is at first I thought it was like a whole new lesson, a whole new chapter, which it is as well. But it also is the gift at the end, which is kind of a cool thing to think about. That of course everyone says children are gifts. I think it's only until you become a mother or a father that you really, really, truly understand what people are saying when they say that. I'm not quite there yet, but I'm almost there. And I'll try and stay in the present moment with it. So Isaiah. So then I moved home, found a place to live, rebranded my business, adjusted to the frequency shift, the vibrational shift in the collective where I am, and also the natural shift of not living close to the ocean. And now I'm here starting to make videos again, listening to Isaiah Decoded. And what does it talk about? So many things that resonate with the new earth, that kind of merged like the new, I don't really know exactly what the new age, people give it such a negative light, shed such a negative light on it. But if you're a spiritually oriented person, like the new age is sort of that initial awakening to the lightness and brightness of potential, I guess you could say. And also to the idea of a new earth. And what do you know? Isaiah Decoded talks about the earth and a new earth, but not in the same words. It talks about the end times mirroring the time of Isaiah, that we can read the beginning and the end of a chapter of a cycle by looking at world events at the beginning and looking at world events at the end, and seeing the codes that were infused in the beginning to read the end, so that they have like an overlay. So I still have to get through the whole book, but so far they talk about basically the Antichrist, like Rudolf Steiner talks about it as Ahriman. It's not actually Lucifer. Lucifer was the original deity that came onto the planet. Then it was Jesus. I mean, Buddha's in there too. I don't know how those overlay, but basically Lucifer was apparently supposed to have incarnated in China 3,000 years before Jesus. And now we have that similar, like another frequency, like a third being coming in to work with what I interpret to be the lower chakras, whereas Lucifer was working with higher wisdom. And if we don't connect that to our heart space and our ability to live in morality and service to others, which is what Jesus taught, as well as alchemy of the heart and those higher like love-based ways of living, if we don't have that connection from our higher mind to the human heart, then it can become very egotistical and get a little off center. So it's all about balance and evolution and integration of these blessings or activations that each being brings to the planet. And now we're stepping into a new energy with this Ahrimanic energy. And in Isaiah Decoded, they explain it as being a king of the north, or someone who looks good on the outside, but eventually their actions lead to destruction. And that after the destruction and after the chaos, a new order will arise. And that kind of goes with the Illuminati or mystery school, higher level teachings of order through chaos. So it's very interesting how much effort it takes, or expansion of awareness, non-judgment, or like the ability to kind of move above the earth, people's individuated expressions, and see that some of these themes that we might deem as really negative are actually just spiritual principles that maybe are the way they are on a greater scale, bigger than the human mind can really, tap into to create. So, so basically after this, the rule of the Antichrist, which I don't know how long that's supposed to last, from there, the new paradigm will emerge. And he speaks about how there is a ladder of frequency for souls on the earth. This is Isaiah. And when you're kind of in the middle ground, where I would interpret that as like younger souls, God requires less of you because you're younger. So in kindergarten, God requires less of you. In your PhD, God requires more of you. And it's a bit like that on earth. So one thing that does is like unhinge us from judgment on others. I was really thinking the other day how much effort it takes to be a human for everyone. How much effort it takes to create, to build businesses, to live a healthy life, to exercise, to raise a family. And that when we judge others for how they do it, we're kind of just totally whitewashing the understanding and the compassion we can have for just how hard it is to be a human, and just how much effort everyone has to put in, no matter how it looks in the end, So I was really feeling that the other day, to just lighten up on others, So yeah, for me, where I'm living in, I find like, I know that I have high standards in myself for what feels good for my living environment and my inner functionings and capacity, but I've come to a place over time to not have to project that on others, and really, keep that for my own personal energies, and then be able to really see people where they're at, and not just wish that they were doing it a different way, but so much of the time it's like we project what our inner truth is onto others, and that's where things can get mucky, because we're all unique. So so basically the ladder is, the higher you go, the older your soul is, the more lifetimes you've learned, the more lessons you have, the more light you have. Those are my words. In Isaiah, it's a bit more like the closer you get to God, the closer you have to be like God, the closer you have to be a servant of God, and his natural law, his natural way. And then of course there's like a whole big probably discussion as to which God are you connecting to, because sometimes if you listen to Lisa Renee's work, there's like deceptions with Yahweh and Jehovah. Yeshua seems to be always from my studies, a very positively oriented version of Jesus that's always like very loving and benevolent and wise, and like an Essene, or sometimes people would associate with Pleiadians, although there's like negative and positive Pleiadians too. Whereas Yahweh and Jehovah, they become a little more like a little darker when you get into the nitty gritty. So who is God, right? Like what God, when we connect with the Bible to God, like which God are we talking to? Is it the oneness of the universe? That's sort of the new age idea, that oneness. And I guess that's a principle that Jesus also taught as well, like that we're all one in the end and connected to each other. But as individuated beings, we have our own personalities and our own ego, our own personal identity as we grow here on planet Earth. So Isaiah talks about that, being closer to God and further away from God, and requiring more effort. the older of the soul that we are, the more we might have to serve humanity and step into those roles of service to the world in whatever capacity we have the ability to do. And I think a lot of you light workers and starseeds who might be watching that, you're probably one of those, just like I am. And then the other interesting part that it speaks to is how before we grow on the next rung of the ladder, how oftentimes we'll fall back a couple rungs to be tested and tested to see how we do under stress, how what we choose. It's like the test that brings you to the next level. The humbling, you could say, when you're supposed to be there, where the frequency where you're supposed to go, but then you get knocked down 3 rungs, you get, the wind swept out from under you, or, whatever it could be, like lose your house or become publicly humiliated or these kind of things. So, but that's before you move up to the next rung. And then he also talks about in the book how we can also go downwards on the ladder and move towards the more darker energies, or the Luciferic. That's where it's like the demonic, devilish energies. I guess that's just power to service to self energies, like empowerment through outsourcing, through taking in manipulation. It's always like instant gratification, manipulation, deception, and egocentric kind of actions, you could say. I guess to me that's the root of it. So you can gain a lot of power, earthly power, moving down the rungs as well, because you're still growing and making choices. And what he also speaks to in this book is how in this new age, when things turn very chaotic and negative, we can look at it on a global scale, we're going down a couple of rungs before we get to move up to the next one as a collective. He speaks to how the earth, and this is an interpretation again, so I'm not taking the root source from the Bible, but it is somebody who was born, I looked him up, he's born in 1940. And he's a scholar specializing in the Hebrew language and the analysis of the book of Isaiah. So, he was excommunicated with the Church of Jesus Christ. And then he was readmitted. Okay. Anyway, I have to do a little more research on the dude, but he basically said that the earth is also growing and evolving, which I haven't heard from a point of the Bible yet, so that was cool. And that in this process, the lower 3 rungs of the ladder will be deleted from Earth. So the lower 3 darker forces, people who are expressing in those darker forces, or it could be aliens or entities or non-physical beings as well, that those frequencies will be cleared from the Earth, because the Earth is moving up in her ascension and can no longer hold or house those types of beings, which directly corresponds to the idea of the New Age. So I thought that was so interesting. Or the Golden Age, or the New Paradigm. That was really interesting to see that interpretation from a book in the Old Testament. All right, and now theme number 3. And full disclosure, I had to track back in this video, listen to the beginning so that I knew exactly what I was going to talk about now, because I already rambled on, and I'm glad I did, because I probably wouldn't have hit it on the exact same from the exact same angle. So the last thing I wanted to talk about was like stepping into a higher consciousness, mentally, emotionally, speaking out like the new paradigm language and lingo, and having this fear that it makes me having this fear that it means that I'm working for the dark side or Lucifer, or, like to speak kind of the wisdom teachings out loud. Because a lot of the places where I've gone to learn about the hidden systems tend to be through people who speak only through like being with Jesus only, and kind of, how do I say this, like kind of delete the idea of past lives. A lot of the time there's no connection. Even the earth becomes like a demonic, like to think of her as alive. They kind of whitewash that or take that out. So because so much of how I think and feel as a healer incorporates higher wisdom and earth connection, I'm always very hesitant. I have been hesitant now to speak that out, but doing the dishes today, cleaning my house, some new insight came in, which is old insight, which I'm just reincorporating, kind of embracing in its fullness, is that the only real way to know that we're living in the light of God and the goodness of God is to live a moral life in our own basic sphere, in our own house, in our own family, in our own inner world, to the best of our abilities. And if the Luciferic energy is the higher dimensions, then that is also a part of the higher intellectual dimensions. Not the higher dimensions, but the higher aspects of our human nature related to the chakra system and the like the world mind or the enlightened mind, which corresponds to layers of our energy field. It's a part of us. It's just like we have 5 fingers. It's a part of our accessible consciousness. So I just had this realization that if we're working with the Luciferic energies, you know, at the beginning of my awakening journey, I bought so many books. I love books, and got a pretty good collection going. I looked back after learning about the secret society stuff and saw like some of my books were like made through the Luciferic Trust and this kind of thing, and it freaked me out because I'm like, what? I thought it was like, you know, working through the heart energy and this kind of thing. And you don't really touch into Lucifer when you are looking through the New Age lens, right? That's kind of hidden. But now in retrospect, seeing that somewhere on the earth where these light or versions of the secret societies are, a lot of that knowledge is at the core accessible to those souls who are ready to evolve into receiving it. It doesn't matter how you grew up. It's a universal soul level activation or pathway that doesn't mean you have to have grown up in an elite family to be able to access it, from my understanding. So after being with myself a little today and cleaning and listening to my inner thoughts and letting things through this Mercury retrograde pull things through to be healed and integrated, it just came to that realization that higher wisdom is a part of our human nature. It's a part of our remembrance. And when we pull it into the heart space, when we pull that knowledge down into the heart space, we will use it in a service to others and service to the whole, service to humanity to the best of our abilities, and that's the best we can do. So I'm going with that. I'm personally aiming to live the most morally aligned life that I can, based on the principles of natural law and the compassion of the heart. Another cool thing to note is that where I moved back to over here, where I grew up, is actually a town on the 45th parallel, which means that where we live is exactly halfway to the North Pole and halfway to the equator. We're right in the middle. And it just so happens that when I built my blog, I named it Balancing Duality. So that's what I'm striving for as an individual as I continue to speak out more this multidimensional way of being with soul-based principles and deeper reflections on evolving as a spirit in a human body, entering motherhood from this vantage point, being a Piscean type of being who's very self-reflective and wants to connect with others from that space of understanding who they are as individuals. So that's where I'm going here on the 45th parallel with Earth Heart Healing, and I won't keep you much longer. If anyone has any thoughts or reflections or areas where they want to pivot off of for more information, please don't hesitate to write a comment with a question or send me an email to the email at the end of the video, and I will see you next time.
Take a deep breath, let go and love.